Hello, dwellers of the internet, welcome back. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about Lovecraft. Now, this guy is a horror genius. He is a man who specialized in the knowing of the unknown, the discovery of horrors beyond imagination, beyond anything perceivable by the five senses. Specifically that there is quite a lot of his works and a lot of his written material that is simply about the concept of something being so horrific or so foreign or so monstrous that it goes beyond all human perceivability, beyond anything that we have found to be relevant to anything that we could use as a point of reference for comparison as far as the horrific nature of his creatures that he's creating in these stories are concerned. I don't know exactly what direction I planned to take this in. I just know that I've been getting into Lovecraft lately. I bought quite a few of his stories and quite a few of his books on audible.com, and I've been listening to them and reading through them and just, repeatedly analyzing different stories that he's come up with. There's quite a few that are provocative of the mental state of crazy people or people who are interested in the horror aspects of storytelling, just a lot of shit that is meant to tantalize and poke and prod at your curious nature, as far as your instincts of suspicion and a sense of sort of an expectation for paranormal activity are concerned. You know what I mean? Like he's trying to get you to believe the unbelievable in his stories, and I can't exactly explain yet how he does this through his style specifically, but I can give you kind of an idea, or I can attempt at least to explain how he's doing this. What he does is he sets up his stories as purely conventional. Like, he sets up a setting, he sets up a few characters, he sets up the environment, and oftentimes a house or a common living area for said characters and whatever individuals you're focusing on, or that are the main focus of the story. And all of this seems extremely conventional in the beginning of his storytelling. It all seems like it's completely normal, like it's going to set up for some kind of casual story about, teenagers coming of age, or people gaining a certain lesson through life that they have acquired through some type of struggle that they have eventually overcome. Some kind of basic storytelling that is going to happen. And then he completely subverts this. Now, granted, I can't say for sure. I haven't done enough studying on Lovecraft to be sure of whether or not a lot of his writing and a lot of what is interpreted by his writing is intentional. I don't know if this is intentional, but he just then completely subverts that expectation for a common story to be told. He has the perfect setup for a display of normalcy, and then he fucks you ultimately. But this doesn't come instantaneously, which is why the plot comes coupled with all these eerie details and this feeling of uncomfortability, because the further into the story you get, the more drastic and the more high stakes these events become, the more delineative from any kind of point of reference the stories get that we have. They branch further and further away from any kind of commonality of storytelling. We start getting into how the characters themselves even break away into the meta at some points, saying, "Oh, I've heard a lot of ghost stories, and I've been a person who's associated with a lot of folklore in my time, but I'm still a very rational thinker, and I'm an educated individual, and I know the difference between reality and fiction." And that's the fucking thing, is that the characters that Lovecraft creates, the characters that he's designing, who go through these stories that are unearthing all these inhumane and unimaginable horrors beyond the wildest creative mechanisms that anybody could come up with, as far as the descriptors for the undescribable, which is a very interesting tool to implement, and commendable to Lovecraft himself for just mechanically being able to construct the words to describe the indescribable, I gotta say. But the specific way that he does this, the way that he designs these characters, is that he makes them seem smart. He makes all of his main characters, most of his main characters, and a lot of side characters seem well educated. They all, at the beginning of their stories, seem like they have good heads on their shoulders. The guy at the beginning of the story about Dr. West, I believe is his name. The guy, the assistant to Dr. West, believes himself to be a completely rational and scientific individual, and as the story progresses, he not only follows Dr. West in all of his crazy pursuits and all of his in all of his further branching away from normal rationale and common practices and a common sense of morality, even of scientific ethics. Not only does he continue to follow this individual because he's his assistant, but you can see the degenerative effects taking place in this character's mindset, not only due to his further infatuation and interest in Dr. West, but due to the experiences that they've shared together in attempting ultimately to raise the dead back into the world of the living. And this to further give credit to Lovecraft, this concept of the raising of the dead, of zombies, of people coming back from the grave, is one of the oldest stories ever told, but and at this point seems cliche and could even be utilized for comedy movies, of which it has been. Comedy in media, film, books, any kind of a display or communication of media has used this concept for comedy multiple times, because it would seem as if it's so cliche that nobody could take it seriously. But Lovecraft writes these stories, and this story in particular about Dr. West and his assistant takes itself so seriously and is able to depict the characters in such an accurate and relatable light, to where you look at these characters and you at some points will find them admirable for their disposition in relation to the world around them, and the way that they confront situations philosophically, and how they are able to analyze their predicaments scientifically, and able to pretty much just more or less educationally able to think themselves out of certain situations and continue to move forward and pursue their goals. With the way Lovecraft presents these characters, it embodies and communicates a sense of realism that you wouldn't get by listening to any other story. And this realism is met with, ironically, the most abstract and the furthest depths that you could dive into the psyche of an individual. Horror. Just. Abject. Ultimate. Scary. Fucked up. Psychologically traumatizing horror. And when the creativity of a person that is able to create these worlds and is able to take you to a different reality where these things that only exist in the imagination, that can't be described through the words that we have come to know, that aren't, these creatures that aren't bound by the language that humanity is limited to speaking, these creatures that, defy description because of their very nature, because of their ability to go beyond the senses. When that world of creativity to that extent meets the world of characters who are the most relatable that they could possibly be, not only just relatable but admirable and seemingly successful individuals who are above even yourself, who then eventually succumb to the beliefs in things that they never would have believed in their entire lives. People who have statuses such as scientists, technicians, professors, people who, these characters embody people in society who hold positions of which would be deserving of not only extensive admiration, but would be looked upon as people in society that are looked at as people above the average individual, people who the average individual can and should look up to in order to motivate them to strive to be a better person. The fact that these characters can be made to then believe in something so chaotic and something so beyond the original or normalized scope of imagination means that there is something fucking serious happening in this plot. When the world of these admirable and relatable characters meets with this endless void of creativity and abject horror, when these two worlds collide, when this writer is able to create not only the most relatable and admirable character, but also the most unimaginable and unspeakable horror, and when these two types of characters meet, not instantaneously, but gradually through these slow-paced and unnervingly horror-driven descriptions and communications through which the story is told and these characters are described, then the art that is created as a result of this becomes one of the most horrifying, deplorable, sickening, frightening, gut-wrenching, terrifying, and real experiences that you could ever get from stories told by a single individual. And the fact that all of this could be created by one man, the fact that I stumbled upon this and, got interested in Lovecraft and thought that, oh, people just talk a hell of a lot about Lovecraft. They like his stories and all the emo and goth kids are into him. He must be a cool writer. At least he must have some merit. The fact that I came into his writing with that kind of an interpretation and came out of it with something so much more that is just a testament to how much quality is present and how much is communicated in the works of this writer, because this is some real shit and it is some good shit. That's all I've got to say about Lovecraft, is that he will surprise you, he will take your imagination beyond its limits, and he will make you feel as if you're right at home and studying with some intellectual peers right before he shoves the knife into your skull and shows you that the alien conspiracies or the monsters under your bed are actually scientifically proven real things that could possibly exist in your reality. It's quite horrifying, and it's the kind of horror that can't be recreated well, I don't think, unless somebody comes along who is able to interpret his works to their fullest extent, and not only, interpret them that well, but is able to recreate them well enough to do them justice. Lovecraft is fucking amazing, and will psychologically scar you if you let him. And if you're like me, and you like that kind of shit, I'd say check him out, man. He's not just a guy who is, supposedly for the emo or the goth culture or what have you. No, if you want to experience true horror, if you want to feel fear like you haven't felt since you were 5 years old in your diaper, then you need to check out Lovecraft. Very interesting stuff. Anyways, that's it for this episode. See you guys in the next one.